Welcome everyone to our podcast, Motivate to Move. This is episode number 60, and I am John Legroff.
And I'm Diane Trites.
Well, Diane, today you found a very special guest, John Collicott. Now, we know a few things about John, and we'll go over a few of them that I have here in front of me. And just to let people know a little bit about John and whatever, we'll see how it goes from there, because obviously this is not starting out great, right? What do we know about John? Well, we know that he's 42 years old and that he's the youngest of three sons, and he was born in Amherst, Nova Scotia. We also know that John has worked as a paramedic for 20 years. Now, we also know that John worked as a lifeguard as a teen. He competed in the New Brunswick and Nova Scotia and then the Nationals with his lifeguard team. That sounds pretty cool. I don't think we've ever talked about anything like that with anybody. Then we know that he kind of got started in running. He went out past his house, marked a paint mark somewhere on the road 2.5 kilometers away, said, "This is going to be my 5K route." He's got a pretty interesting story to tell about that, so I hope we get into that this evening. We also know that after that, he's done some 10Ks and halves, full marathon, and then he found his love for trail running and how he really wanted to do longer distances. So we're going to get into that tonight, and then finally, John has talked in his bio about some struggles that he's had, insomnia, and a few other things, and I hope that we get into that too tonight. So, Diane, what do you think about tonight's interview?
I think John sounds like a really interesting guy. He does some really cool, fun stuff, and I'm looking forward to hearing some of his stories.
And you said your piece a lot better than I said mine, so that's good. So, John Collicott, thank you very much for coming on our podcast tonight. It's really a pleasure to have you on. And maybe if there's anything else you want to tell our listeners about yourself, like who you are, maybe, and what it is you like to do for fun.
I'm very flattered that you guys are having me on tonight. And as I kind of said earlier, I listened to some of your episodes, and I think you guys do a fantastic job. So this
Thank
is
you.
just a real
Thanks.
pleasure for me. As far as other things, I think I'm too busy.
I agree.
I'm sure we're all a little too busy to a degree, and it's just a bit of a flaw of mine. But as I kind of mentioned earlier, I was working on my bunkhouse on my property. My wife and I just bought a small piece of land in Wentworth, and so I was working on that today. And that's just kind of one of my passions, is doing some woodworking. And I'm not a licensed contractor, so I certainly ask for help when I need to, and have all the checks and balances, of course. But anyway, we're hoping to live there at some point. So that's kind of my hobby that I'm putting to work for future life, if you will.
hmm And that sounds like a hobby that is going to be consuming a lot of your time over the next little while to get it ready, for sure.
Right, and we're mostly, just because of the time of year, we're just trying to get it kind of weather tight. But I try to balance it. So today I went out for a bit of a 45 minute to an hour run after, just before I came home, just to try to balance it. It's a little fun after the work.
And I just want to mention that it was your wife, John, that reached out to us and
Yes.
said, "Hey, I know this guy that
I know my husband. Yes.
She knows this guy.
I know this guy, and you might want to talk to him." And so I really appreciate that she reached out to us. I'm so glad that she did that.
Yeah, no, Deb Collicott, my wife, she's fantastic. She's my support and my rock, and I don't want to sound, you know, um, mushy or whatever, but I think that's a little bit deserved too, because she helps me with whatever I dream I have in the moment, and she supports me with it. So that's fantastic. She's just amazing.
That does sound fantastic, and it is okay to be mushy, even on a live podcast. Oh wait, we're not live, are we? Oh, thank goodness for that,
Thank goodness
Sundays.
we're not, because I'd be in a lot of trouble already.
Right, that wasn't mentioned.
So I just have a question for you, John, just to kick things off here. You sent us a very, very thorough bio about yourself, about your life and your activities. And one thing that you mentioned that I was kind of interested in was you mentioned your father, who he retired. You said he painted mostly frogs.
Yes.
T- tell me, how did he get the frogs to sit still?
It's funny. He would tell little anecdotes similar to that. He started. Well, he was a professional photographer. I think he started in the 60s. He did apprenticeship. He worked for Pritam Studio, and he opened up a couple of photo studios in New Brunswick. I guess he worked in some and in Nova Scotia as well. He's transitioned into drawing and then painting, and then when he retired, that was kind of his thing. And he was doing landscaping stuff, and then he just got into
Okay.
frogs. And if somebody had a passion, like if their favorite baseball team was the Boston Red Sox, he'd paint a frog standing up to bat wearing a
Oh,
Boston
for heaven's
uniform.
sakes. That's really cool.
Yeah,
That's actually really cool.
so that
So
was his thing.
that's
Yeah.
awesome. So I know when you were younger, in your younger years, you were a lifeguard.
Yes.
So you were obviously a strong swimmer.
Well, interestingly enough, I got by. There's certainly a physical component for swimming and for your bronze medallion and cross, and then for your National Lifeguard Service. And I kept the swimming up. I wasn't on a competitive swim team or anything like that. I did eventually become a swim coach. I did that for
Oh,
4 or 5 or 6 years. I really enjoyed that, but again, there's just you only have so much time. But with the lifeguarding, yeah, when I was a teenager and in my early 20s, I definitely did that a lot. I worked at an outdoor pool and I worked at a YMCA, and we had put together a lifeguard team to do lifeguard competitions. You know what? And I haven't looked into this recently, so I have no idea what it's like now. And it seems like such a long time ago. But we had two guys and two girls on our team. And at the time, you were only allowed to have a maximum of two guys on your team. Anyway, we had a blast. We competed in a couple provincial competitions and a couple national competitions. And we might have come last a few times. We might have come not so last, but we learned a lot, and it was just a lot of fun. I think one of the life lessons I took from that was you got to see that in your own little world, in your pool, in your local pool, you might think you're all this, but then when you get into a larger stage, you realize that there's some pretty interesting people out there you can learn a lot from. I really took that as a lesson.
mm-hmm.
Always keep your mind open. You might be sitting in a waiting queue to go do some skill or some event, and you don't know what these people are capable of, and then you see them go, and it's like, wow. So that was pretty interesting.
So you're a one-trick pony. You're into running. What?
Just like me, one trick pony.
Me too, except now I have no tricks. I have zero tricks. So you wanted to start running. What made you think that running was something you wanted to try?
And I was trying to I was looking at that question. I can't remember exactly what running became the choice of. I know that when I was in my mid 20s, I was out of shape. I gained a little bit of weight. It seemed like something I had done a little bit of when I was in my teenage years. I actually looked up the requirements last night, or what you're required to do to apply for the Nova Scotia Lifeguard Service. I had gotten my waterfront qualifications actually at the St. John Fisher Lake, I think, in St. John. And one of the components of it was a 3.5 kilometer run, and I would have been 17 or 18 years old. And I remember I had to go to New Glasgow and I had to do this 3.5 kilometer run. And I trained on a treadmill for, it seemed like a long time, probably only a couple of weeks, but you know what teenagers are like. It seemed like forever. And I remember doing the 3.5 kilometer run, and I thought, I'm not awful at this, but I wasn't great at it. And it seemed like it just went on and on forever. Anyway, I think when I was 25, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to try that. I'll just do it. I just started it.
And I mean, that's fair enough.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. So tell our listeners how you started. You went out with your car and measured a distance.
Right.
So tell us about that.
So I had I knew of people that had Garmin's and, watches like that. And I didn't have one. I had a cheap $10 Iron Man wristwatch that had like a timer on it. And I thought, well, that doesn't really tell me the distance I'm going. So I got in my car, and the way I just went up to the next block, and then I just drove 2.5 kilometers out. I don't know if this is legal, but I made a small spray paint mark on the side of the road. It was a secondary road.
I hope it's legal because I've done that too.
Right. Well, and since it's gone, they paved over it, so it's not there anymore. But anyway, I made this mark, and then I think I drove a little farther out, and I drew 3.5 kilometers, and then I drove home. I didn't have any running shorts. I had swim trunks. So I put the swim trunks on, and I had just a regular cotton T-shirt and whatever shoes I had to run in. They certainly weren't runners. I mean, they might have been cross trainers. I went out for this run, and it felt like I was out there all day. I was going and I was going and I was going, and I think the thing that caught me is I just noticed so much of the scenery that you drive by. And when I was running by it, I was noticing, like, geez, there's actually a fence and a horse in this yard in town, and I'm remembering as if I'm running up the road now. But anyways, so I lived in Oxford at the time, and it was running out a road called Birchwood Road, and I enjoyed it, but during the moment I hated it because I thought, like, this is never going to end, and I thought I must have ran past the mark. I must have ran past it. I must have ran past it, but I'll just keep going. And then I eventually hit it, and then I was so angry. I'm like, it's going to take me forever to get back home. And I did not own a cell phone or anything, so I just turned around and ran back. And then I think the next day I thought, well, I better do that again. That kind of started with that.
Did you ever think, though, John, that you may have passed the first mark and that mark that you saw might have been the actual second mark? Did that ever?
Well, at the time, I think I was so angry at myself because I just thought, I used to be in some kind of shape. I wasn't then, and it was just so frustrating. And I eventually got a GPS watch, and I was able to verify that's what it was. But yeah, and I had a logbook, and I would just write my times down. Like, I think I did 5K today, and I would write down the time. And I had no idea what a pace was or anything at the time.
Right. Did you go back and check the distance in the car to make sure that it was really 2.5K when it
I
was?
didn't. I
Yeah,
just
you didn't.
I don't
Okay.
know if it. I don't want to say it was laziness. I just thought, you know what? It has to be. It has to be two
Right.
and a half.
And that's the distance that you ran on that day, and that was the measure you were going to use to measure all your other runs, wasn't it? Because you
Yeah,
used the same route.
I ran that a long time, and interestingly enough, I've lived in a few places since then, and every time I live in a place, I have a 2.5K run that I do, and that's my thing. I Now that I'm into trail running, I don't do it as much as I had, but I would always have this staple of, here's my 2.5K run. If I only have a certain amount of time to run in the day, that's my bare minimum. Since I started this bunkhouse in Wentworth on our property, where it's about 4K to the ski hill, and that's kind of where I do a lot of my runs, starting and stopping. And there's so many trails back there, and we'll probably get into that a little later. But I started doing this little bit of a run after I would work on the bunkhouse a little bit each day, just to get it, a little bit of playtime in, and it's maybe not quite 5K because of course trail running is takes longer than it does road running. But anyway, so I haven't figured out my new route there yet.
Oh, I'm sure it'll come soon, though. Yeah, it won't take long. When did you decide after doing these 5Ks, and I know you did some 10Ks and half marathons, but when did that moment pop into your head like, hey, I really want to start doing longer distances?
Yeah, and what had happened was I would always run up the same route. It's just I don't know if it was a comfort thing, and it's like because it was low traffic, and I wasn't gonna bump into anything else. Like there's no intersections or anything. And I think one day I got past the 5K mark, so I thought, okay, I'm gonna. This is at least a 10K run today, and I just thought, I at that time I had a Camelback, and it was maybe a liter and a half of fluid in it, and it was just a perfect temperature day. I felt great, and I thought I'm just going to keep going. Like I don't, and again, I didn't own a cell phone at that time, so I don't know. Back then, people seemed braver. Maybe I was more brave than now, but I kept going, and I ended up getting to a junction where I knew if I hung a right, it would go to the highway, the Trans Canada. But if I hung a left, it was a dirt road that I'd never been on. So I hung a left, and I came. I was running by this beautiful river, and I came by this property that looked like it could have been some kind of a resort's not the right word, but it was like a beautiful landscaped grass. And I thought, this is just amazing. And then I came across this other road called Hansford Road, and it's got this awful, I'll use the word hill. Uh, but now that I like hill running, it's pretty awesome. And I remember going up it, and it's like it was hurting my back. I had to go up this hill; it was so steep, and you just go up and up and up, and then after a while you taper down. And I knew I was running back towards town, and it turned out to be about an 18-kilometer loop. And I got back to the house, and it was my first marriage, and my wife at the time was like, where were you? Like, that took forever. I thought you were going to be back in 45 minutes. But anyway, it was just, and then I fell in love with that. And then I just kept going for longer and longer runs. And again, back then I didn't know anything about pace. I just thought I'm just having a great time. I get into audiobooks, and I would listen to a great audiobook, and it was entertaining, and I was out in nature, and I loved it.
Probably a pretty good release valve for you too, with everything else you have going on, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the one thing I can really control is the run I'm on. So it was
Yeah,
it
it's
was
true.
it was really my me time.
Right. And I think we all need a little bit of me time once in a while.
Right.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And so many of our guests have said the same thing that you just said, that when you go out and run, it is time for me. It's
Yep.
it's something I can control. I can't control all of the chaos that's happening at home. I can't control, everything that's going on at work, but I can control this run.
Yeah.
And in this 45 minutes that I'm away, I'm just enjoying it for myself.
Right. And my just you mentioned my dad. My dad had painted this, I'll use the word painting, years ago for me, and it was the word relax. And then he painted little things in it like a circular saw and other things that I would do and maybe some running stuff. And then he had like me sleeping in one of the letters. And he was like,
Oh,
you never relax. And he gave it to me, and I have it hanging in my garage. And it's just funny because even though when you're running, you're not relaxing, but mentally I'm relaxed.
Oh yeah.
yes.
Yep.
Yes.
And
Exactly.
The dopamine is at full value
that's
when I'm running, I find. So I'm quite relaxed
that's right.
usually. So, and you mentioned about, getting into books while you're running, ebooks. And you mentioned in your bio about a book called The Art of Running Faster, and
Right.
that you said in your bio that you absolutely loved it. And what did you love about the book? And what happened when you wrote the author? That's a pretty interesting story. Julian Goder, right?
Right. I ended up. I was asked by somebody if I would take part in the Cabot Trail relay, and I was intrigued. I had run in other races, but that was my first relay race, and I think I became. My instinct was yes, I love this, and I loved the idea of the challenge, but I got so nervous because then other people are depending on my time, and I went the first year, and I think I was given an easier leg, and that's fine. I even remember when I was running it, two of our teammates were standing on the side of the road, and they said something like, "You're gonna time out, like you're going too slow." And then I sped up, and I ended up having plenty of time. So I don't know if they were kidding with me, but anyway, afterwards, I thought I need to train harder for my speed because I've never considered myself a fast runner. I'm not. I don't think I'm. I definitely know I'm not gifted naturally at running. I just do it, and whatever happens, happens. I have fun doing it, but when I run with somebody who I consider gifted, it seems like it's effortless to them. And when I was a swim coach, I used to see you might only get a couple a year that were gifted. And of course, usually these are younger swimmers, and you try telling them, and they're, 14, and they're like, whatever. And you talk to their parents, and they're like, okay, thanks for telling me. And it's like, no, your kid's really gifted. And I knew I wasn't that with running. So I bought this book, and he broke up everything into his personal stories. And he was a cross country runner. He ran in the 70s and 80s. He was top 30 or top 50 in the world for like a 5K time of, it was like 16 and some minutes or 15 and some minutes for a 5K run, and something I'll never attain. But anyway, he would talk about other runners like Dave Bedford. I think in the London Olympics, Dave Bedford ran the running program, and he talked about Sebastian Coe and Steve Ovett. And you can watch some of these runners on YouTube, and it's just mind blowing how amazing they are. And I know there's current runners today that are just as amazing, but anyway, I just thought it was neat that you'd read these runners in this book, and then you'd look up YouTube videos, and you'd see a guy in a 1,500-meter run, and in the last lap, he would just take off and just win by a country mile. And it's like, wow, I wish I could even meet this guy, let alone do that. So I bought it as a Kindle, and I emailed the guy because he's a running coach. And I emailed him, and I just said, "Hey, I love your book. I think it's fantastic, and it's helped me a lot. And I just want to thank you for writing it." And he emailed me back, and he said, "Hey, and of course I'm in Canada, and he's in the UK, and he said, I really appreciate you saying that." He said, I don't often hear anything back. And for my mind, it's like, this guy's successful. Why would he care what I say? But obviously, that means something to him. So he said, if you send me your address, I'll mail you a signed copy. Um, so,
Awesome.
so I did. And it was after the Olympics, and I guess he had something to do with it. So anyways, he had a piece of paper in there from something to do with the Olympics, and he signed it, and he just wrote a little saying in it, like, or a little note, like, good luck with your running. And it just meant a lot because I really took to his stories, if you will. I love this guy.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
Great story.
That is a great story, and I bet you treasure that right now, don't you?
I do.
The book.
I've had a couple. I've actually bought that book for several people because they'll run and they'll be like, "I wish I could go faster." I'm like, "I have this amazing book," and they're like, "Can I borrow it?" And I'm like, "You cannot, but I will buy this book for you." And I order it on Amazon and mail it to them.
That's cool. So you're passing it on. You're passing that favor on to someone else.
Right. Absolutely.
I may have to buy this book, Diane.
Hey, I looked at it on Amazon, and it's in my shopping cart.
There you go.
But I haven't clicked the buy now just yet.
Well, there's lots of good resources out there, so it's there's always something to get.
Let's just talk about the distance. When did you run your first marathon?
I was looking at that, and I'm probably going to be off on the year slightly. I want to say it was 2010 or 2011. I don't even know if I ran a half marathon before I ran the marathon. I signed up for the Blue Nose Full, and it was just as interesting because I remember I got there and I was so nervous.
Tough course too.
It is tough. I had some IT band issues, and now that I've been running a long time, or not a long time, but now that I've been running longer, you get to know your own body. And anyway,
Hmm.
so I was having some IT band issues, and I did some things that now I would know better. But I was, I had my leg taped, but I had a brace on it on my knee because I thought that would help, and I didn't know any better. But when I went to the bib pickup, the expo the night before, John Stanton was there, and
Ah,
I
yes.
thought that was really neat. And my bib was actually number 42. And he made a little comment. He goes, "Oh, it's you're going to set a record." And I did not, but anyway, he signed the bib, and that just meant a lot to me because of course, I had owned one or two of his books at one point. I guess I still own them, but anyway, he was of course one of the first running inspirations. A Canadian that you hear about doing things. And so anyway, yeah, I signed up for the Blue Nose. I can't even remember what my time was. It was probably over 4.5 hours. I talked to a lot of people during the run that I was running with, and I usually run alone, so I thought that was really interesting. And I thought, like, this is just really fun, and I just can't wait to keep doing this.
The best part is about running there is high fiving people as you're coming down the main drag.
Yeah,
When everybody's along the road, there's so many people there. People are like high fiving you. It's pretty, like the kids especially. They'll be reaching out with their hands, and you run by, and you.
that's right.
It's pretty crazy. It's really awesome.
The a run that I had done that I would say had similar energy, but there would have been more people, was I had done the Army run in Ottawa at one point.
We've heard a lot about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I remember at one point there was a guy holding a sign, and he said, "Just remember, you paid for this." Uh, when you're struggling and you're thinking, "Why did I do this?" And anyway, yeah, I always thought that. Or the other funny one I like is, if I collapse, can you pause my Garmin? But
Absolutely. Yes.
but yeah, the Blue Nose, I ran the 10K several times. Then I signed up for the full, and I really enjoyed it. And I thought, doing longer runs is my thing. I love doing shorter runs, but I was never gonna win a sprint, if you will. So that's why I thought, and I'm never gonna win a marathon, but I just thought, I just really enjoy this.
And how did you get into trail running?
A friend of mine, Mike Hudson. I ran with him in Cape Breton, and he lives outside Oxford, and I was living in Oxford for a while, and we'd run together for a while, just fun runs together. Anyway, at one point, he had signed up for a run in Wentworth called the Wascally Wabbit, and I had I had never even knew trail running was a thing. I didn't know trail running had their own races. I was very naive of this world that I love now. So he said, why don't you come? It's about 27 kilometers, and I'm thinking, as a road runner may, I thought, well, 27 kilometers takes me X amount of time, no big deal. And I was running in Vibrams at the
Yes.
time. I used to get this thing where when I would go for longer runs, my lower legs would start to get pins and needles like they were falling asleep. I'd been to physio and different people, and I never really got an explanation for it. And then I tried Vibrams out. Vibrams, they might now, but they did not make trail running shoes. I wore a set of Vibrams, and I did a lap of Wascally, and I remember, you start off at the snowmobile club and you run up the dirt road, and then you hang a left into the woods. And I thought, this is kind of neat. Like, I did orienteering in high school, and there was no orienteering aspect, but you kind of make a beeline into the woods. And I thought, this is pretty interesting. And then we're going down a pretty rugged trail, and I'm doing what at the time, it's like there's all these puddles and mud, and I'm trying to skirt them, and I'm like, I can't get wet. Like, why am I, what? I can't get wet. Like, this is, I can't get mud on me. I can't get dirt on me. And I was trying to skirt everything, and I was trying to gingerly go, and some of the rocks were pretty rugged. And anyway, so we started running down this decline, and there's a river on the right. There were trees and the smell in the air, and there was no cars. There was a lot of runners running past me, but there was no dangers really. And I looked down and there was this flowing river and it was beautiful. And I just thought, this is my thing. This is my new thing. Like, I don't know what I need. I don't even know what I don't know about it. I just know that this is my thing. And I just kind of built on it from there.
And did you go that whole race without getting wet?
No, I did not. It's just interesting because I know that course really well now. There's so many trails in Wentworth, and I've done a lot of exploring this year. I used to just go and run the trails I knew, and this year I thought I'm just going to go and explore, and I have time. And anyway, but knowing what I know now, there are certain areas that the puddles are so big, especially in the springtime. There's no getting around it. And I just thought, at one point, I just said to Mike, I'm just going to go through. And I almost went up to my hip at one point in this puddle. And then it just became funny and it became a thing. We got back, we finished our lap. We just did one lap. And I got back to my vehicle and I had no other clothes to change into because why would I? I remember I had to take my Vibrams off and I was in my bare feet. I think I was even driving. Mike and I carpooled. We drove to the Wentworth store, and at the time they had pizza in there, pizza slices for sale. And I said, I don't know if I'm allowed to go in without shoes on. And he's like, no one's going to care. Anyway, we went in and bought pizza, and it was a really enjoyable day. It was totally different from any experience I'd had like for a race up until that point. And everyone in the running community, it doesn't matter what it is generally friendly, and it's a team positive atmosphere. I think just the thing that hit it out of the park for me was just the fact that it was in nature and in the woods, and it was so peaceful.
And do you still run in the Vibrams?
No, no, I don't. Vibrams. It's funny. When I first got an Instagram account, I used to take pictures of me and my Vibrams. It'd be like a snowstorm out, and I would be running outside in my Vibrams, and I would like lay down on the ground, and I would take a shot of my Vibrams, my feet with the snowstorm in behind it on the road, and I'd post it on Instagram and I'd tag them. And one of their accounts messaged me and said, "Do you mind if we use your photo?" And I thought, I wonder if I'll get any money for this, and I did not, and that's fine. But they don't make trail running shoes, and you really need trail running shoes. It'll just beat your feet up too bad. I ended up when I would do longer runs, I would sometimes get stress fractures in my feet running in Vibrams. It happened a few times, and it was so painful, and it would put you out of commission for a while. And I just switched over to other shoes.
Is that because the Vibrams wouldn't have the cleats on them to hold your foot in place? Like you'd be sliding around in them on the trails? Is that why you'd get those stress fractures?
Well, I'd run the Disney marathon, I guess now 3 times, but one of the 3 times I did the goofy run where you run a half marathon on a Saturday and then the full marathon on the Sunday. And I did it in Vibrams. And that was the first time I got stress fractures. If I could back up a little bit, I totally feel like there's a place for Vibrams in running and in physical activity. If you're doing all sorts of activity, I think Vibrams are a fantastic shoe to put on. They're light, they're not bulky, they're not cumbersome. Like if you're doing rafting or even shorter runs. But when I started to get into longer runs, they just didn't have something that I could use, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's just interesting to remember that when I did the Fundy circuit in 2017, there was a gentleman there that ran the entire course barefoot
Oh,
with
really?
no shoes. More power to him.
I did that one time. I did a 5K run in bare feet. I never realized this, but when you're running in shoes, every once in a while, you may scrape the top of your foot on the road and you not even think about it because you're in a shoe. So
Yep.
I'm running along, and then all of a sudden, my right foot starts to it's intense shooting pain. I look down and I scrape it on the road, and I'm like, oh, I don't think I'm going to do that again. But again, if that's something I practiced and trained with, certainly. I mean, there's certainly a massive culture of people in the world that run barefoot.
Oh,
Yeah,
for sure.
Oh yeah.
For
Yeah.
sure.
absolutely. So I do not want to take away from that. It's just not something I've dedicated time to.
And
Hmm.
I met one of them in St. John running the marathon, an older gentleman,
Really.
2018, I believe, and he ran the entire marathon in St. John barefoot.
But he worked up to that distance, I'm sure. That
Oh
wasn't the
yeah.
first day running in his bare feet. Let's talk a little bit about this 100 miler in 2019. That would be at Chignecto, right?
Right. That was the Capes 100.
Capes 100. Tell us, first of all, why would you want to run 100 miles?
A personality that I listen to podcasts, and he has a YouTube channel, and he has this funny thing where when someone says, "Why would you?" he yells back, "Why not?" I won't yell it back, but
Good answer.
it seemed like something that I had absolutely no idea what it would be like, and I just really wanted to know.
Mm-hmm.
And I had no idea even during it how I was going to feel hours later. I tried looking online for training programs. You Google search, and you can certainly come up with some. And I found they were very lacking.
Lacking. Yeah.
It would be however many weeks, and it would be so on your first week you're going to start off, and this is your total distance, and there was really no description to what it was to entail. I didn't have, I guess I could use the word imagination. I just didn't have the experience. As a swim coach, I knew that I did not have the technical or the background for running, right? So it was out of my depth. I ended up paying for a running plan, and I would get monthly races, not races, but workouts on Training Peaks. It was really interesting, and essentially it would start off with on your first week, what can you do with some shorter distances, and a lot of it was adding elevation, and that was the theme. It would add elevation, add elevation. And I remember at one point I was supposed to do, we'll say, a 25K run. I was supposed to have almost 1,000 meters of elevation.
That's a lot, 25K.
Yeah, and I had it might have been 800, but let's say 700 or 800, and I've had 150. I thought, geez, I had this 25K run. I felt fantastic. I did amazing. I didn't do amazing, but for me, I did amazing for me, right? I felt really good. I'm like, geez, I really did not hit the elevation aspect of it. And then it turned into I had to find places where I could run in Cumberland County that had the elevation, because there were, hills in Amherst that I thought, that's a hill. And I would go up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down. And then I get 75 meters elevation. And it's like, oh my gosh, like, someone's going to call the police on me. Like, what's this guy running up and down for 5 hours outside my house? So Fenwick Hill outside Amherst was the biggest local hill, if you will. And one of the training exercises was, I want you to do, say, a 2K warm up, and then I want you to progressively get faster, and I want you to go up, say, 500 meters, and then 750 meters, and then a kilometer of Fenwick Hill. But I want you to start off pretty slow, and then by your fifth repeat, I want you to be at a pretty intense jog, like say 70% jog running up the hill. Now, you didn't start off that in your first day, but that would be what you would build into. And then it turned into, I would go to Five Islands, Nova Scotia. And because a lot of this was in the wintertime, so I couldn't do it on a trail because, of course, the trails are all covered in snow and ice. So I had to do it on the side of the road. So in Five Islands, there's Economy Mountain, and I would I would basically go. I would start at the entrance for where the Five Islands Park driveway would be, and then I would go up the hill and then down the other side. And it's funny because when you get to the very top of the hill, there's a sign that says "lower economy," and and it couldn't be more unrealistic if it wanted to be. But anyway, so I would do repeats on that. So one day I did a marathon where I would power hike up the hill and then I would run down the other side, turn around and go back and forth. And I would get my 1,500 meters of elevation. It was pretty intense.
That's determination.
Yeah, that's some willpower there. Holy cow.
Yeah, and it was funny because Deb was doing it with me because Deb was training to do 100K at Capes 100 as well. When I'm doing all this stuff, she's always there to support me. Like there were many times, especially in the wintertime, I would run too far away and then I'd call her and I'd be like, look, I think my phone is freezing and it's going to turn off. Can you come get me? Because the weather dropped 8 degrees and I'm not dressed for it anymore. She'd be like, I'll be right there. And so anyway, but she was certainly doing her running as well. Anyway, so her and I were doing repeats on Economy Mountain, and this older couple pulls up in this half-ton truck, and they roll the window down, and we're going up the hill, and they're like, "Hey, how you guys doing?" We're like, "Pretty good," because we'd been doing repeats on the hill for hours at this point, and they're like, "What are you doing?" And we're like, "Well, we're training for a 100-mile race." They're like, what does that mean? And anyway, we talked briefly and they said, listen, and they told us where they lived. And they said, if you need like a sandwich or something, just pop into the house.
That's
Oh,
awesome.
All right. That's
that's awesome.
well, because every once in a blue moon, I'll be running. It's such a motivation killer. Every once in a blue moon, somebody will roll the window down and be like, are you okay? Do you need to drive? Just after a while when you're running weird things will happen, right? But these people were like, what are you doing? And come get a sandwich. We didn't, but but I kind of wish we had. But anyway, I feel like I got off track a little bit. You were asking.
Not at all. Not
No,
at
that's
all.
great. I'm glad you told the story.
Yeah, so we were, Deb was taking her pass for the 100K and I was doing mine for the 100 miler. Essentially, I started in, say, November of 2018, I guess that would be. And I was gradually increasing my distance until the spring of 2019, where I was starting to have to get, say, 100, 110 kilometer weeks. And I would start to have running days where I would do like a 50K run and then I would do a 10K run in the same day. And it became all consuming.
Yeah, it will.
My whole life revolved around training for this. And I don't know how many times my son would be like, hey, Dad, do you want to whatever? No, I got to go out for this run. And Capes 100 came, and I did not complete it, but I got to about 116 kilometers. And my downfall was my footwear. I did not apply lubrication to my feet. I ended up cheaping out on 2 pairs of shoes. I had gone with Solomon's, and Solomon makes very good trail running shoes. And I remember I take size 12, and I have very bad luck going into a store and having what I want in stock. I almost always have to order online. And yourself, I'm sure when you get a running shoe you like, you don't know if you like it until you actually put some distance in it. And then when
That's
you
right.
like that shoe, you never want them to stop making it.
Hmm.
But they do.
They do all the time. So I had gone into Mountain Equipment in Halifax, and this would have been, say, 3 weeks before the run. And I said, I need another pair of shoes because my thought was I would trade shoes during the run at some point. The salesperson admitted that, they're not really knowledgeable in 100-mile races and whatever, but they showed me the trail running shoes they had in size 12. I bought a pair and they were not good. I felt great up until about, oh, well, I shouldn't say I felt great up until about, there was lots of highs and lows. That's a big story too. But like at one point it got dark and I was, say, 80K and I was all by myself. Deb called me and she was in Cape Chignecto Park and I was around Cape Dore. I was farther ahead, and she called me and she said, "Did you notice the sounds of all the animals in the woods?" And I was like, "No." And then I just stopped, and then I could hear all the animals around me. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't even," because I didn't have any music or anything playing because we weren't supposed to. And then I got pretty freaked out about it. And then we had no cell coverage, and then I lost her. And then I'm like, it's like I didn't even conceive of all these animals, but they hadn't bothered me. And, I'd done lots of trail running, but not much of it was at night. And when I was listening to your talk, John, about your 100-kilometer run, and you were saying
Right.
that you were doing running in the middle of the night. And yeah, it's a different atmosphere.
I could see the eyes in the bushes looking back at me from the raccoons and stuff as I
Right.
was running by. It was pretty crazy.
Right. So,
Yeah.
anyway, yeah. So I had a couple of highs and lows, and I remember I came across these two women, and I caught up to them. I started talking to them, and we had a bit of a chat, and we knew a couple of common people. And then it got to a point where they were like, "Yeah, so why don't you just go ahead?" And I didn't want to leave them because I was going to be alone again. But I didn't know these people, and I thought, you know what? They don't know who I am. I don't want to, I don't want to make them uncomfortable. So I was like, okay. So I just kept going, and then I came across a guy. I caught up to him, and he was French. I think he was from Quebec. Spoke very little English, and he didn't want me to leave him, but he didn't really know any English. So he was like, "Hey, anyway." So long story short, I got to about 100K. I felt super tired, and I kind of wished I had coffee. And I remember being in the aid station at 100K, and the race director was like, "What are you doing? Like, get back out there because you don't want to spend too much time in an aid station." And then I got my pacer. We were going, and my pacer said that for a while I was talking like a mile a minute. I was talking and talking and talking. And then he's like, "And then you just stop talking." And he was going along, listening to me tell a story. And then all of a sudden I stopped talking. And then he turns around and looks at me, and I'm still moving, but I'm just not talking. And then he starts telling me a story. And I remember in my mind hearing him talk, and I'm thinking, that's really interesting. I don't really understand what he's saying, and I kind of want to ask him to explain it, but I don't have any energy to talk. Anyway, and then my feet started to hurt, and I told him, and then he says, "Well, let's look at him." So we sat down on the trail, and I took my shoes off, and he looked, and the pads of my feet were all bruised and all blistered, and it was really bad. He said, "That's really messed up." Anyway, so we had a first aid. I had a first aid kit on me. So he took my first aid kit out, and he tried to put duct tape on my feet, but it was just way too late at that point. And we got into the next aid station. I don't know. I really tossed it back and forth. I was so upset, but I was like, I don't think I can keep going because I was limping at that point. It was frustrating because physically my body felt good, but my feet, I just didn't take care of them, and they let me down. It was say 114, 116K. I can't remember now. That was the farthest distance I'd ever gone at that point. And I was like, I DNF'd, but it was an achievement, right?
It was an amazing accomplishment. Like, that's incredible.
I learned so much about myself. This probably isn't good to admit out loud, but when you're driving somewhere and it's the middle of the night and you're tired and you start to I feel like, you have like a little tiny micro dream, and then you're like, okay, I got to stop. I got to have a nap, or I got to have a coffee, or I got to have something. I was having those while I was running. I was running along, and then I would have this little dream, and then I would feel my body. It's almost like I would almost fall a little bit, and then I would wake up, and I'm still walking on the trail, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like it was just, it was something I hadn't ever been through. It was interesting.
So did you need some caffeine tablets? Do you think that's what was going on, or just lack of sugar, or a little bit of everything?
There's a couple things. I take salt capsules on Amazon. I actually buy empty salt capsules. There's a couple different kinds you can get. There's one that's not animal based. I can't remember the details on it now, but you buy it and you get a pack of like almost 1,000. Like you'll never go through them before they expire. But I just take Himalayan salt, I put them in it, and then I would take, say, one every hour, hour and a half, or something like that, because my hands swell if I start to get sodium depleted. And for my fatigue, I just didn't know what to do. And, beyond that, I have had Red Bulls, I've had coffee, and it helps. Yeah. So I think it was just I needed some caffeine. And yeah.
Hmm.
So
So lesson learned, right?
absolutely.
You almost have to fail, right, before you can really succeed. I mean, pretty tough to go balls out and get it all done the first shot. I mean, it's really hard to do.
It is so hard. And, I get back to work. I remember my partner at the time at work plays hockey, played pickup hockey. And he was like, well, that's just however many marathons in a row. Like, how big of a deal is that? I'm like, well, it's not exactly the same thing. I said, you play hockey? And he goes, yeah. I said, what if you played like 12 games of hockey in a row and there was no intermissions? And he's like, well, I guess when you word it like that, it's hard to, because it's, you're attacking it different, right?
Yeah, you have to look at it totally different. It's not the same as one hockey game as playing all those hockey games in a row. Not the
No,
same
but
at all.
but if you're running a marathon and you're running a marathon, you will work at a certain intensity that,
Yep.
when you're done that marathon, you're like, wow, I gave that everything, and I could not run another marathon. But of course, if you're running a second one after that, you certainly dial the intensity way down, right?
Hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
And your
absolutely.
mindset has changed too. And it makes all the difference. If your mind is set, oh, I'm going to run one marathon, and then you run the marathon, and then they're like, no, no, go out and run another one right now. Your mind's not set for that. Good luck.
No, you're done. I would be done.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Just back to your training a little bit. Did you have to change your nutrition when you were training for the 100 miler?
I did. I tried a number of different things when I was running. It's just funny. I tried so many foods when I was running. Most of them were bad. We would go to Five Islands Park. It's, just short of 5.7K around. You could do a lap in about an hour. There's a race there, son of a gun. It's a pretty fun race, but it's a last man standing style. So you're in it until you can't make that hour start again. And anyway, so I had a lot of nutrition fails at the son of a gun, but most of it for me was hydration. I sweat so bad, I dehydrate so much. I would do long runs, and there's been times where I would literally have to go into the ditch and try to drink water that looked like it was clean and fast moving because I thought I was going to pass out.
Wow.
So I would start to modify my training where I would leave a jug of water somewhere, and then I would go
Yep.
back and get the jug of water afterwards. Or I would run a shorter loop, and I would have a cooler on the back deck of the house, and I would pull into the yard and I would refill whatever, and I would only be there long enough to refill the water and go back out. I would do things like that. I think earlier on in my running, I would just try to keep doing a bigger and bigger and bigger run, and then you'd have to bring so much stuff with you. So it's like, why don't you just do loops? It might not be, as interesting, but it's just easier to have your own aid station.
Right. Yeah.
Yes, it's a lot more efficient for sure, isn't it?
Right.
You
So
can always run the opposite way too if you
yes,
want to change the
absolutely.
scenery.
So, like you asked about nutrition, the first time, and this is funny. Well, funny as in against me. It's anyway. When I first started doing ultra running, I didn't have a hydration pack, or I had a Camelback, but it didn't hold anything. It wasn't a vest that you could have pockets. So I bought a fanny pack. It was like, 1995 John. I had a fanny pack and I put a stainless steel bottle of water in it, or I would put snacks in it. And we did a loop of Cape Chignecto in one day, and I did it with some other people. And I remember when we were standing in the parking lot, everyone was getting ready, and I put this fanny pack on, and one of the runners said, "Good luck with that." Wow, it was like it hurt my back. It was not efficient. And anyway, so I tried eating different things. Rich Roll, I'd listened to his podcast a little bit, and he would talk about this, the avocado wrap. And he would have a wrap, and he would have some avocado with a little bit of vegan mayonnaise in it, and maybe some strawberries or something like that. And I brought those with me around Cape Chignecto, and then I would try that. In my I tried coconut water and maple syrup in my water to try to add some of the salts in it, the potassium and the sodium. And
Hmm.
that ended up hurting my stomach. And I tried a number of different things. I would go on a tuna sandwich binge, and I would tell Deb, like, okay, I'm doing this. I got to make like 4 tuna sandwiches. And then I would eat 2 of them, and I'm like, I never want to see one again. And she's like, okay, we're never buying tuna again. And the next big run, I'm like, did you buy tuna? She's like, you told me not to. She ended up making pancakes, and she put strawberries and blueberries in them. And I would put those in a Ziploc bag, and I would eat that. Again, it would just be, what could I try to tolerate? So I've gotten into the habit now of eating wraps with. I'm trying falafel, but it can't be dry, or some chickpeas and cheese. So it's not vegan, but it's more vegetarian. But I just find that's got enough of everything that I can eat it. It tastes okay. And then if it gets soggy from being in my pack for hours, it's still okay. Anyway, I feel like I diverged way off on left field there, but so for my hydration, I use Scratch, or I've just started using Tailwind. I have a bee-free filter. It's a 500 mil filter. I've drank out of so many rivers in Wentworth and Cape Chignecto. We did last summer. I did Cape Chignecto. I did the loop in one day, 3 weeks in a row. One week I did it by myself. That was super lonely. But one of the weeks, another guy, Victor Wright, hope he doesn't mind me saying this. After I say this part of the story, he might wish I didn't say his name. Anyway, him and I were drinking out of a river, and one time he didn't filter his water, and he ended up getting sick,
Oh yeah.
really sick. He had to go on antibiotics, and I was like, I drank out of the same river as you, but anyway. But now I use a bee-free filter, and it's a soft flask, and it's super easy to use. It's super fast, so it's just, why take a chance? So that's the smartest thing, is to be safe about it.
Wow. I never real I've heard people talking about these filters, but me, I'm more of the road runner type. I've done some trails, but I've never done anything long enough to need to do that. So it sounds like it's great to have with you if you're doing super long distances. You can't carry all this liquid with you.
Right. Especially, I'm running in Wentworth. There are some rivers that, even if it's dry, will still run fast enough that the water's okay. And even if I just have to stick to a 5 or 10 kilometer area, I can keep hitting these rivers over and over again, and I don't need any other water. I could just use this filter and fill up from that.
Hmm.
Ah,
Okay,
that's cool.
that's
That's cool.
interesting.
How long is the filter good for?
We bought it from the first one. Actually, I bet both of them was the Trail Shop in Moncton, and the gentleman at the Trail Shop said it can do 1,000 liters. I said, okay, and he goes, he he told me what he does is he has a notebook with him, and every time he fills it, he takes out the notebook and he puts a tick in it. And I said, I'm probably not going to do that. I'll probably just buy a new filter every year. But apparently, 1,000 liters is what it'll do. It works really well. The water comes out super clean, and there's particles in the water that it totally filters out. So
Yeah, I can't imagine pulling out that notebook in the middle of you're at a kilometer 137 and you're of 161K and you're like, oh yeah, I got to get my notebook out here and
yeah,
write that
did I
down.
make a tick the last time?
Yeah,
I can't remember.
yeah. I can hardly stand and I don't even know my own name, but did I put that? Yeah, right. Where's the
Yeah,
notebook? Yeah, sure. That's
a
not going to happen.
notebook's just one more thing to carry, right?
Yeah,
Right.
you don't want that.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
It's It's great if you're just hiking around, I'm sure, but
Hmm.
if you're running, no.
Well, and in his defense, that's probably what he meant. He probably meant,
Oh yeah, of course.
if you're just hiking, have the notebook. But even still, when you're hiking, you have so much gear you're lugging. So
I want to ask you something here, John. I'm going to go back a little ways.
okay,
So we're going to go way back to 2008. Your then wife and yourself adopted twin boys.
yes,
And you said in your bio that that brought some significant challenges because both boys have ADHD. And you also said that one was quite severe. You also had very bad insomnia from 2013 on until recently, I believe, is the way I understood it in your bio.
yes.
And you thought, or maybe you've been diagnosed, I'm not sure exactly how it came down, but about that you may have PTSD from your 20-year career as a paramedic. Now, I just said a lot of stuff here, so there's a lot going on,
Right.
and you're running and doing all this stuff. I just want to know, where did you find the time to train with all this going on? And what was it that made you just not want to quit running altogether and just give up? Because some people would have just said, wow, this is just way too much, and I'm just going to give up.
There's probably no quick easy answer to that, but I'll try to sum it up. I've been through probably hundreds of hours of therapy, and that would be including with the kids and with everything. And you end up, a lot of it is stuff you may have heard before, but I think in the moment it's just nice to have somebody tell you a reinforcing thing that you need to hear. But with that, I ended up having to, there was different antidepressants that I ended up being on, and I had Ativan for anxiety and sleeping pills. All of those are awful things to say out loud. When you talk to a doctor, they generally don't want to prescribe you these things, and they don't want you on them long term. The realistic side of it is there's no action plan that's given for how to get you off it. Uh,
Right.
there's no easy how-to book, and a lot of it is self-searching and finding vices. And certainly there's lots of bad vices out there. When I was, I'll say at the worst on, different pills for anxiety or depression, and then the sleeping pills, it certainly affected my personality. It's one of those things where you start perpetuating the nervousness of, like the sleeping, for example. I know that I don't sleep well, and I'm going to get totally nervous at bedtime, especially if I have to go to a hotel room or we're traveling and we stay with friends. And then it's like, did I remember my sleeping pills? What if I forgot to pack them? And it's always a terrifying aspect. I found with running, it affected my running negatively. It was harder. Sometimes I just wouldn't have the motivation. And I just felt disgusting, I think is the way to say it. And at one point, I just, Debbie helped me a lot. She helped me a lot, and it was just like, don't sweat some of the things you're sweating. And she's not gonna, she didn't bother me about my sleeping. Like some people might, if you have a bedtime routine, for example, it's difficult if your spouse has a bedtime routine because they can't sleep, and then what if they're not on their phone and they have to have no TV or no stimulants after a certain period of time, and then but what if you want to watch TV? So it's a lot of I was going to use the word reciprocity, but back and forth, trying to meet compromise with each other, I guess is the word. Anyway, so I ended up being able to, I think the ultra running, it just gave me that thing to look forward to, if that makes any sense. And it's like, okay, I'm gonna go do this kind of run, and I'm gonna get excited about it. And here's what I did the last time I did it, and I'm going to do it again. And I remember the good feelings I had doing it. I had the runner's high, the cliche about that, but I felt the success of my personal achievement from it. and I was able to get off the antidepressants. I was able to, basically right now I'm on a very low dose of a sleeping pill. I was referred to a sleep clinic in Moncton. They do a sleep apnea machine with you. And then they interview, a doctor interviews you, and the doctor essentially said the same thing my family doctor would say. I don't like the fact you're on sleeping pills. You need to stop them. That's it. So she said,
Yeah.
but she said, I'm gonna refer you to something called cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. And my first initial reaction was eye roll. More therapy? Like, what do I need to talk about sleeping? So, because of COVID, and she even said, I don't even know who does that around here, but I'm going to refer you to it. So, I was at work one day and we had a quiet moment, and I did a YouTube search and I found a guy. I looked, and some of them charge money on YouTube. They want you to pay sometimes like $100 a month, which that would keep you up at night, right? But anyway, so I watched a YouTube video and he described me. He was like, you might feel this and this and this, and he was describing all these things, and I was like, this guy's describing me. And then he started to talk about some mechanisms of like when you're going to sleep, you might start to worry about 20 different things, and it's going to be unrealistic. And if you're rested in the middle of the day, you would never worry about this stuff like you are at 2 in the morning. So just don't worry about it. Don't worry about any of it. All you need to think about is I'm just going to lay here and I'm going to relax. It sounds unlikely of a thing to help, but it did. So I watched these guys' videos periodically, and it just seemed to help. So I feel like when you start to get some success with that, then that helps to increase your morale with sleeping. And then you wake up, and sometimes you go to bed and you're like, geez, I did this whatever today, I'm tired, I'm not going to take a sleeping pill, I'm just going to see what happens. And then you wake up 5 minutes before your alarm goes off and you're like, I didn't even take a sleeping pill, and then you feel great. I don't know how interesting any of that is, but I think that that's been a big part of my thing. It's just, I'm a worrier. I worry about a lot of stuff. And I just found as I got older, it just wore on me.
Mhm.
Right, right.
I think it's fascinating, and I thank you for sharing that, so honestly. It can't be easy to talk about some of the challenges you faced, and I do appreciate that you have shared that with us.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking. Quite honestly, sometimes you just feel alone in that kind of feeling, because you're like, well, I don't know to anyone else. Like you're sitting around talking with friends, and they're like, oh, I go to sleep easy, and it's like, oh, I would, what I wouldn't give to have that. But
Well, and you just don't know who out there needs to hear this, that this is something that you've gone
That's right.
through, and this is what helped you, and it might, motivate them to seek help for their own challenges.
We like to talk about stuff like this once in a while, and we bring up some mental health issues on some of our episodes. Diane and I do, and we like to talk about it a little bit and bring it into the open just a tad and crack open the daylight some, because I believe, and I don't want to speak for Diane, but I think that she believes too that there's a lot more of this going on than what we believe or what some people believe. So we like to bring a little bit of light to the subject and just let people hear that, hey, we're all normal and stuff happens, and sometimes you get challenges and you got to deal with it. And if some people maybe have figured it out or dealt with some of this stuff, it might be good for other people to just hear so they can realize, what's
Exactly.
going on.
and I appreciate you bringing it up. It's and there's lots of components. When I worked out west, one of the jobs I had, we would do night shifts for 2 weeks. And if you're working in northern Canada, um,
It's
sometimes,
daytime. Yeah.
well, but in the wintertime, I wouldn't see daylight for 2 weeks
Yeah.
because I'd be sleeping for the 4 hours it was daylight. I mean, it's a little more than that, but it certainly seemed like it, and that perpetuated it, and it's definitely a process of falling down to that point, and then to get yourself back out. It's just don't give up hope, and don't accept the answer of no answer. Just find a pathway that you're comfortable with.
Well said.
Well said. Thank you for sharing.
No problem.
I want to know about this homemade 100 miler that you
Yeah.
did.
I had a lot of fun doing that. When I didn't finish Capes 100 in 2019, I signed up for Capes, which would have been 2020. And then, this magical event of COVID happened and everything shut down. And I tried to kind of keep my training going to a certain degree. It's just hard because you ramp up your training. I'm sure every runner can say this. When you do your event, depending on how hard it is in your body, there's a recovery time. And like when you were doing your 100 kilometers, John, I don't know how long it took you afterwards before you felt limber enough to do something. Or Diane, like you talked about your 6,000 and some day running record. I don't I, I had to rewind that to listen to it again to make sure I heard the number right.
No, it was 2,441 over 6 years.
6 years.
Yes.
Right. I'm sorry. But anyway, I think that's fantastic, by the way. I've never been able to get a month of consecutive running, so I was
No,
blown away
me
by
either.
that.
It's because I was challenged to do it by somebody and I was not going to let him win the challenge. And he didn't.
There you go. It's fantastic.
Not after 2,000 plus days.
Yeah. I just want to mention right now that he did not win that challenge.
No, and that needs to be said. And sometimes some of the most satisfying things in life is something you don't even know you need to be challenged at until it's
Yeah.
said, and then it's out in the open, and you're like, I'm going to win. But anyway, so for my homemade 100 miler, I thought that I was going to use the Five Islands Park because it's less than 6K for a loop. It has elevation in it. There's a pretty good hill climb, and there are some flats. There's a little bit of everything, and because the loop is so short, you only need one aid station. And that was pretty important. And we talked because you could have an aid station at the parking lot, but we did it when the park was open. So we booked a campsite, and a lot of local runners from Amherst came. Deb was the crew boss for me. She had posters made. Her and I had watched this special on TV about the McDonald's Monopoly scam thing, and
Oh, I saw that.
there was a really funny
Yeah.
FBI agent in it. Anyway, she printed off a couple of pictures of him and stuck them in a couple of spots in the park. And she had I think his name was Doug, and she was like, Doug wouldn't want you to stop running, and she did a bunch of stuff like that. She put glow sticks in part of the park at nighttime. So when I was going through part of it at nighttime, and she just had gallbladder surgery like weeks beforehand. So she wasn't even really supposed to do much physically. But a lot of runners came from Amherst. Some of them camped at the park. A couple of running friends I have, Anthony Fromm and Jason Warham, they were there. And there was other ones like Amy O'Brien and Victor Wright, who I mentioned earlier. He came. There's so many, like Victoria Vance came, and some of these people. It would have been like an hour and 15-minute drive one way, and they would come and they would do a couple of laps with me, and then and it was so moving for me. It's funny because I told you that my downfall at Capes 100 was my feet, and I changed some of my plans for my feet, but I didn't lube them properly. I bought better sneakers. I think I had three different pairs of shoes. I actually threw one out during the race. I was like, okay, these were my favorite shoes, and they're 50 kilometers past due now. I didn't lube my feet properly, and I ended up running into some problems. But I remember getting to 100, 110K, and I felt great. I felt, honestly, I felt like $1,000,000, but I remember thinking, I feel pretty good because I wasn't as trained as I was for capes. I did not have the mileage in, but in some respects, if you don't have some of the high distance, you're also a little better rested, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Um, but anyway, I felt pretty good, and I started to get a little stiff, but I started to have some problems with my feet, and I started to like loosen loosen the laces on my shoes because my feet started to swell. And anyway, everyone ended up leaving because it was like Saturday morning at 6 a.m. until Sunday sometime. It was a big question mark. When is John going to finish this 100 miler? And, everyone has their own life going on too. Like people had to work the next day. And some people like travel from Halifax to come. And again, very appreciative of it all. But at one point, Sunday afternoon, it was basically me, and I kept doing some loops of the park, and I got to about 130 kilometers, and my feet hurt so bad. And I just said to Deb, like, I don't know how long this is going to take me to do this. Like, I don't know if I have like, why am I doing this? And she's like, well, you got to finish. And I'm like, all right. So then she said, why don't you just start doing repeats, go out to the highway and then back on the main road, just maybe take a break from doing the trail for a bit. It's still distance, right? So I started going back and forth and back and forth. And in my head, I was mathematically figuring out how many repeats do I have to do of this and how long is it taking me per repeat. And I, of course, wanted to finish it below the 36-hour mark, which is what Capes 100 was. And I started to get to the 36-hour mark, and I still had, I want to say, I still had 15 to 18K left. And my feet hurt so bad. My feet hurt so bad. And I remember I got back to my vehicle because we're aid station. We have a Jeep Wrangler, and we had the back seat out. So I built these custom shelves in the back, and I had like, a drawer for clothes and a drawer for whatever. And I had coffee, I had Red Bull, I had everything that I didn't have for capes, except I didn't put lube on my feet. So, but I changed my socks a bunch. And anyway, so I got back to the vehicle, to the aid station, and I had a little tantrum. I told Deb, I used some not so great language. And I just said, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, why am I doing this? And she's like, well, then stop. And I looked at her, and she's like, you're not going to stop, are you? I'm like, no, I'm not going to stop. So anyway, she said, why don't you just run to Truro? I was like, I guess. And she tried to do some of these laps with me, but again, she just had this gallbladder surgery, so she really couldn't. And a couple of people had messaged and said, do you want me to come back? And I just felt bad because they'd spent their whole weekend doing this, right? And I was supposed to be done. I was very annoyed with myself. I lost my motivation, and I started to get quite low. And Debbie would be in the car, and she had Sirius satellite, so she would be playing music. But then, of course, because it's a highway, she can't really be beside me, right? It's only a 2-lane secondary road. So she would drive ahead and then park, and then I would get up to her, and I would she'd be like, how many kilometers do you have left? And I'd tell her. And then I'd start to go towards the car, and then she'd just take off and drive again. I ended up running to Central Economy, which, if you don't know the area, but it's a good distance between Five Islands and Truro, or Masstown. It's a pretty good distance before I finished, and I went through a whole bunch of different emotions. And when I had, it was funny too because my watch at the time would only last for 10 hours. So I would use my watch, and then I would turn it off to charge it, and then I would turn Debbie's watch on, and we had to use a website to link all the files together. So I had to be quite careful that I was going to get to the 160.9 kilometers or whatever, right, for the 100-miler. I knew I had about 800 meters left, and I just started running. and my feet hurt so bad. And I started running as fast as I could. And I thought, I wonder if I can sprint this out. And it was probably the slowest sprint in the history of mankind, but
It felt fast, so
it felt fast. I don't know if I
yeah.
don't, I might, maybe it was a 5:30 pace. I don't know, but it was definitely not, sub five or anything, but I finished it and I stopped and I couldn't believe it. I looked down at the watch and I got to the distance I was supposed to get and I got in the car and it was such a long drive back to the campsite. And we got back to the campsite and Debbie was like so over the moon. And I think another thing that had happened was, people were messaging her and saying like, is he done? Is he done? Like, give me an update. Like he's got to be done or, tell me the update. And anyways, I remember at one point Anthony from in Amherst. He's a really good runner. Anyway, he's done a couple 100 milers, and anyway, he had messaged her, and he probably will deny that he said this, but he said, "Tell John I'm proud of him," and that meant a lot to me, just because it was like I don't know. It was like the weight just totally went away, and I was done. I finished my 100 miler, and we got back to the campsite, and she drove me up to the shower building, and I sat in the shower, and my feet hurt so bad because of the opened blisters and all that. Anyway, this is probably not the most flattering part of the story, but Debbie was waiting by the door, and then she was waiting and waiting, and I wasn't coming out of the shower. Like I was changed. She came in, and I was crying, and she's like, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, "I don't have to run anymore." And it's like because when I started training in 2018 for this Capes 100, I never really got out of the mental mind frame of training for 100 milers. So for almost 2 years, I was doing 100-mile training, and it just seemed like it never ended. And I thought, I can't wait to go back and do a 5K or a 1K. Like,
Or nothing at all if that's what
right,
strikes you that day.
right.
Yeah. So how long did it take to recover from that?
I actually had to work a couple days later.
Ugh.
2 days later, I had to work. I ended up having these pads that I put on my feet. I'm just almost uncomfortable remembering how uncomfortable my feet were. But I had these pads on my feet and I wrapped them up with these dressings. And I have old paramedic boots or old work boots, steel toed ones that I lace up because I use Blundstones now, but I couldn't put my feet in them. So I took the laces out of the other ones and I loosened them so much and I put my feet in them and I had to walk on my heels. And I should not have gone to work because if I had to carry a patient, I wouldn't have been able to. I don't even know what my plan was. I just thought I'm going to go to work and we'll see what happens. If something happens, I could call for, assistance or something. But I got to work and my partner saw what I had done with my feet and he's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "I don't know if I am." I want to say a couple of weeks later, I was doing very relaxed, 3 and 4K runs, and I enjoyed it. I remember when the 100 miler was done, and it took me just shy of 40 hours. And I thought, I'm never doing. I told Debbie this. I'm never running. I'm never running a long distance again. I'm never doing it. She's like, okay, okay, and she was just, you do what you need to do. And then 2 weeks went by, and I'm like, I can't wait till I do my next one.
That wasn't so bad now, was it?
And I thought, and I said, and you know what? I set myself up for the personal best the next time because, it's got to be less than 40 hours. Wow. But she listened to a podcast with a guy, I can't remember what his name is, someone in the States that, does, the hard rock and all that.
Mhm.
And he said he's been first for a 100 miler and he's been last. And he says it's harder to be last because you're out there for so long. And
Yeah.
not that that means I did better than other people, but it's just like the punishment you put yourself through sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Oh, it's pretty nuts. It's pretty crazy.
And, good on you for finishing Because that sounds like an incredibly challenging run.
Well, and I learned lessons again. I would have to double down on some lessons I learned but didn't apply. But anyway, yeah, I think I'm looking forward to the next one, but I'm just a little leery about the mental thing of, I still am a little hesitant about the mental game of it just because it's so all encompassing.
What you just explained is all encompassing for sure. I mean, you put it all on the line. Like literally, you have to put every ounce of everything into it in order to finish that.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. And I remember, after I finished up the shower, went back to the trailer. I had this what was the beer? It was like an apple cider or something like that. I couldn't even finish it. I was just like, because the whole time I was thinking, I can't wait to have this apple cider. And then I got back to the trailer and I didn't even have the appetite for it. But anyway, at least I didn't know that while I was running.
True. Wow. I almost don't know where to go from there now, but I want you to talk a little bit about the Wentworth Valley Trail Runners Association because I know that you have a nonprofit with that. I just wanted you to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Deb and I started this nonprofit. We did a run a couple of years ago. Our nonprofit was actually a different name at that time. It was called Eat Plants Run Wild, and we basically were thinking of an event that we wanted to run, and then we would hold it, and then we would watch other people do the event we wanted to do. It's when you say it out loud, it's a little depressing. But anyway, we held it in Amherst on a track called Dickey Park. I think we had maybe 25 people show up, which we thought was a big success, just because we were brand new to holding events. And essentially, it was we're going to start at 9 in the morning, we're going to end at 9 at night, and you can show up and you kind of have to stay on site when you're there. But what kind of distance do you think you can get in? We borrowed the idea from, there's a couple other events that they use in the US. There's one called A Day in Auburn or One Day in Auburn, and I think it's on the track that the Western States finishes on.
Okay.
Anyways, you basically start and you have 24 hours, and what distance can you get? Anyway, so this was that, but we were only allowed to do 12 hours. So there were certain restrictions that the town of Amherst put on us, and we worked within those. And but anyway, yeah, so we ended up having it, and everyone seemed to really enjoy it. There was some pretty good distances that were achieved. Again, Anthony Fromm, he did 100K. A number of other people did 80K. Some people did 50 and 60. I think a lot of people had some personal best distances, and it's just supposed to be, not a lot of elevation, and the course wasn't difficult. But as you two know, when you're doing a hard event, part of it is your mind.
I think 80% of it is your mind.
Even if you're on a treadmill, at any point in time, you can just get off. And if you're on this track, I think the track was 650 meters. So at any point in time, you could see your car the whole time. You could stop and get in and leave. But yeah, a lot of people had some good distances, and we were quite excited to hold it again. And we asked DNR if we could do one in Wentworth, and we just had that a couple weekends ago, and we called it A Day in Wentworth, and it was 24 hours. Yeah, we had a lot of fun. We had again, because of COVID, some of the numbers of people that arrived at the event and started was a little lower. I think we had 35, but a lot of people put some good time in. I think the highest distance I think was 140K, and a number of people had 100K, a number of people had 80K, and we had a lot of people show up. There's a lot of people from PEI showed up, and a lot of people from New Brunswick, and certainly Nova Scotia as well. We were just excited that everyone came, and it was just such a fun atmosphere. And most of the atmosphere was just the runners coming and talking, the camaraderie of it, and I think we might be fortunate because there's not a lot of events happening.
I'd say.
Yeah, we were supposed to have it in the spring, but then the COVID numbers picked up, and then we had to have it. Well, we had to delay it. So we chose the weekend in October, and we just thought that would there wouldn't be a lot of bugs. The park was still open, so there's like a bathroom right there, and we had a lot of positive feedback. So we're going to hold it again in the spring. We made a small donation to the Wentworth Rec Center. Anyway, and the park for the Wentworth Provincial Park, they were fantastic. The groundskeeper that worked there, he was fantastic, and everyone was just great to work with. And we were doing the event, and this couple comes in. They were asking me questions. We were at the aid station, and they were like, "What are you doing?" And we told them, and I said, "Are you from here?" And they go, "Yeah, we live like you guys are running past our house." And they said there was an event like this like 20 years ago, and we didn't know if you were the same people doing it. And it's like, no. And the people in the community were excited that there was something happening in Wentworth. And
That's wonderful.
yeah, and it's interesting because everyone thinks of Wentworth as being all hills and all that, and this was pretty flat. But when we are able to get a little better known, and we're able to, speak to some landowners and get all the permissions and all that stuff, of course, we want to have a couple of different events. Obviously, we're not going to, duplicate other events that occur there. So we're going to have, but there's so many different trails. I've met a couple of people that make trails or upkeep trails, and we're kind of excited. We have a couple of ideas for some shorter, it won't be 24-hour, but we want to have one that has an elevation challenge. And we approached. Or Deb approached, I should give credit to her. She approached DNR and asked if we could have an event at Cape Chignecto for October 2020, and they said sure. We called it the Chiggy Ultra. Some people who are familiar with the area or whatever, that's the nickname of the park. Cape Chignecto, it's a rugged place. A lot of respect to it. It's just over 48 kilometers for the loop, and there's a couple of other little options in there, but we're going to have a 5K. So if someone's, new to trail running, or if someone, maybe they're coming off an injury and they just want to take something slow but have the experience, there's a 5K option. There's a 20K option. That'll probably head out towards Refugee Cove and then come back. And then we're having a 1, a 2, and a 3 loop option. For many years, I ran in events and I never volunteered. And we thought, you know what, let's try to provide some events that some people might want to do, and hopefully they take something from it. So that's our main goal, is to give something back.
And we do thank you for that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
we appreciate that a lot.
But before we go, I just want to ask, what advice would you today give to 18-year-old John?
Just a little question, just a little thought, right? I mean,
I used to, as a joke, say if I came across my 18-year-old self, I would give myself a vicious slapping. If I were to try to bestow some wisdom, I think I would say learn to slow down in life. When you're in a moment and you're enjoying it, I don't know how many times I've been in a moment and I don't even know that I'm enjoying it until afterwards, and I just rushed through it.
right, yeah.
And I stress about so many things. I stress about if I said, the wrong thing or the right thing, or did I put my foot in my mouth? And anyway, I think that, if I were to meet myself back then, I always said that two things they don't teach you in high school is how to be married and how to budget, have a daily budget. So I think that, just try to live my life. Don't try to keep up with the Joneses, and just try to enjoy things and relax. And yeah, I don't know how good of an answer that is, but that's what I have.
No, that was a great answer.
And don't
That
forget to
was
oil your feet, right?
That's right. Well, that's the $1 million thing. Maybe I would also tell myself, buy some stocks in Google and something, but I don't know. But
yeah, yeah.
We've heard that before too from people. Buy some stock in Microsoft or Amazon or
that's
whatever.
right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. I really appreciate this experience. I was quite nervous about this, but you two were just really set me at ease, and I really enjoyed this whole thing.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that.
Well, John, you're not the one that has to be nervous. It's me and Diane. Like, usually it's me editing out us, not the guest. I'm like, oh man, why did I say that? Brr, gone. Oh,
I
Diane said
know.
that. Oh, gone.
And
No, no, no.
sometimes I'll say something really, really dorky, and John leaves it in, and I listen to it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I actually said that.
Yeah,
Well, come on. I got myself last week when I messed up the ending and I went blah, blah, and I just left it there, right?
I laughed out
Whatever.
loud when I listened to that. Yes, yesterday I listened to it. I laughed out loud.
thank God for editing, right?
Yes. Thank God we're not live because we would be a
Oh
mess.
my words.
In the interest of time, I think we're going to leave it there for this evening. For our very special guest, John Collicott, and my very special co-host, Diane Trites, I am John Lygroff, and we will see you next time on Motivate to Move. Good night, guys.
Good night.
Bye for now.
Thank you.